A very good afternoon to everyone at Shiv Nadar University. I'm really excited to be a part of today's discussion. And I'll be talking about money and mindset, which is a financial decision making during the pandemic crisis. A lot of you may have experienced the instability, right? So it did shatter a lot of dreams during the pandemic. What once seemed like a rock solid certainties, steady paychecks, flourished businesses, comfortable retirements suddenly felt like sand slipping through fingers. For countless individuals, this was not just a disruption, but a full-scale financial earthquake. Yet, amidst the rubble, some managed to weather the storm more effectively. But what sets them apart? Is it the luck? I don't think so. It's the luck. It's definitely a combination of the mindset and the strategic financial decision-making planning, which is also very crucial, but might not have been lucky for a few select who ended up suffering during the pandemic. Money and mindset, these two words seem pretty much straightforward, almost deceptively simple, but in times of crisis, they hold the power to determine who struggles and who finds their footing again, because survival of the fittest, right? During a global emergency like the pandemic, they are not just two words, they are survival toolkits. The pandemic served as a brutal reminder. Financial crises are not a matter of if or but or when. The only thing within our control is how we prepare and respond. The personal struggle, if we had to talk on a personal level, let's take a snapshot of a person who's living in Delhi in a really nice apartment, comfortably employed, with a decent salary. Life seems perfectly good for him. He's cruising, he's enjoying. But out of nowhere, boom, the lockdown happens. Rent is due. He has no savings. And the next thing that he faces is the panic in him. And what happens when you panic? Your decision-making power gets affected. So what did he do? Or what could have he done? This scenario played out for millions, not just in India, but across the world. The pandemic taught us that in a crisis, your most valuable asset is not your job or your home, it's the emergency fund that you had saved somewhere. Though this may not sound like a glorious advice, but it sure is the vital one. Those who had 6 months of expenses set aside weathered the storm. However, beyond the financials, there's the mindset panic, which clouds your judgment, which we initially discussed about, which leads to rash decisions like withdrawing all your savings. And we also noticed that a lot of people ended up hoarding a lot of supplies, which was an action that ended up hurting more than it was helping. So the right mindset would have been to pause, assess the situation, and plan. Let's talk about the Indian landscape, where financial literacy is still developing. The pandemic exposed a crucial and a critical flaw. There is a massive gap in the financial preparedness. Even families with steady income were left scrambling. This is not just about saving money, let me tell you that. It is also about knowing how to manage it when everything else is uncertain. Those who diversified their income, whether through investments, through side gigs, or through freelance work, they found themselves floating, whereas others, they sank. But if you want to talk about from a company's perspective, so we talk about agility, because agility becomes the lifeline. Let's shift to the business landscape, because we spoke on the individual level. Let's talk about a startup which is based out of Bangalore. It has 100 people. The fixed expenses that include salaries, rent, utilities, they don't stop. But do you think they would have shut down like many other companies? I don't think so, not really. So what did they do? They pivoted the same way we pivoted in the initial. What did they do? By having right financial planning, by having right digital platforms, adopting to cost-effective technologies, and leveraging alternative revenue streams. However, it's important to acknowledge that not all businesses were able to adapt, because not everybody was thinking from that perspective, and they were not able to adapt or retain their existing employees. But the ones who were able to, those employees ended up becoming their crucial investment, because I also personally believe as a founder that our employees are our long-term investments. So during the pandemic, the ability to adapt became the line between life and death for businesses, because the scale was 100x. Those willing to pivot, to rethink their strategies on the fly emerged stronger. It was not just about cutting costs. It was about reimagining what they offered, how they served their customers, and how to make their businesses leaner and more resilient. But as I highlighted the agility part initially, agility was not the only key. Companies that prioritize their people saw long-term benefits. Let's talk about the Indian startup ecosystem, where employee culture often drives innovation. Many companies that kept their morale high, a lot of the employees did not know that their revenues were nosediving, but they managed to retain their best talent, though not all could afford to avoid the cost cutting. Those who invested in their employees during the times of the crisis often reaped the rewards later, because it's like a seed. You put it in and then you wait for the fruit to come in later. There's a reminder that strategic decision in the short term can have lasting impact on a company's future success. Now that we have discussed on a personal level, a company level, now let's discuss on the country level. The financial habits and the cultural reflections in our country, which is money management, is tightly bound to the cultural practices. When I say cultural practices, I mean many families, particularly in the rural areas, lean towards saving rather than spending, a habit that provided a financial cushion during the pandemic. However, if we go on to the other side, towards the metro, they were under the pressure to keep up with the fast-paced, consumer-driven lifestyle, which is extremely immense. The cracks is where it showed that they had ended up having a lot of debt on their credit card. They had options where they had taken up buy now, pay later, which showed that we were suffering a lot and we had dried up economically. Whereas in the West, if we compare it, debt is looked as a leverage. India's resilience on saving on something like gold, a culturally significant investment, proved to be a lifeline for many. Yet in both contexts, it became clear that risk, particularly financial risks, need to be handled with more caution. A crisis forces us to reevaluate priorities, and for many, that means focusing less on the luxury, more on the survival, because necessity is important. Preparing for the next crisis, what do you think? We did learn some lessons, right? But where do we go from here is the biggest question. The pandemic was unfortunately not a one-off. Crises will come again. Maybe not in the same form, but they will come. How do we prepare for it? The lessons are pretty much crystal clear. I would highlight a few points. You should diversify your income streams. Whether you are an individual or a business, do not rely on a single source of income. However, at the same time, do not moonlight. Be clear with your employers. The second important point, which I highlighted initially, was about the emergency fund. Well, they're not optional. You should have it, whether for personal expenses or for business operations. In our startup ecosystem, we call it the runway money. And the other important point is to be flexible in the face of uncertainty, where you have to be extremely critical. You need to learn new skills. You need to keep upskilling yourself. You need to shift your business models and constantly reassess your financial priorities. Most importantly, stay calm, because panic is the enemy of sound thinking and decision-making. A crisis demands a cool head and mind. When everything around you is in a chaos, your mindset becomes your most powerful asset. So, I would like to close this remark by saying that financial resilience beyond money, in the end, your financial resilience is far more than just numbers. It is also about the mindset. It is about embracing the adaptability and never allowing a crisis to dictate your decision-making. The pandemic was quite a brutal teacher for all of us. We did not have a choice but to learn and adapt. But if we learn from its lessons, we can approach the future not with fear, but with a lot of wisdom. What is the next crisis? I personally can't predict. I'm sure a lot of you can't. But we do not know yet. But one thing is for sure, you need to be armed with the right mindset and the financial strategies. We can face whatever comes with confidence and hope. Thank you so much, guys.